Welcome to the CEC Report. It's April 5th. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, do you intend to die for the banks? Aussie regulators up to their necks in planning to steal deposits. And finally, Obama and the British don't want peace with North Korea. First, do you intend to die for the banks? This week, the CEC is rushing into print a massive print run of our New Citizen newspaper. And it's going to have this headline: Glass-Steagall or the British Crown's mass murder. Do you intend to die for the banks? And the point of this is that, Craig, Cyprus has exposed the true intention now behind the financial oligarchy. And that intention is they're going to kill people to prop up their power.
That story is not being told by the main media here, Robbie. We're
No.
the ones that are releasing this from our international contacts.
Well, people will know there's a big financial issue in Cyprus. What gets reported is the effect it's having on the stock market, and therefore on your savings or on your silly investments. What's not being reported is that this so-called solution that they've put in place in Cyprus is killing the people of Cyprus. I will give you a flavour of that from what we know. So here's the deal. Because they confiscated the deposits, right, and they had this little compromise of it, you know, they're trying to maintain this pretense that anything below 100,000 euros is safe, but everything above it, in some cases 60% above it, they've just grabbed to keep the Cyprus banks propped up. And as we've said in previous weeks, it's not so much propping up a bank, any given bank, they're propping up the euro system in Europe. That's what they're propping up, and Cyprus is part of that. So to do that, they've grabbed these deposits, and because they grabbed the deposits, they cannot let the banking system of Cyprus go back to functioning normally, because the second they do, everyone in Cyprus will pull their money out because of what's left, and the banks will all crash.
Yes.
Right? So the solution to save the banks is going to kill the banks, guaranteed. So they've got these tight controls on it. And they're in the form that the people of Cyprus can only withdraw 300 euro per day.
Robbie, this is the euro currency. So that doesn't stop people in other countries saying, look what's going on in Cyprus, let me pull the euros out of other banks in other countries. It's the same currency.
No, it is. And we know they're already doing it. That's not being reported very much as well. There's a lot of I suspect deer in the headlights phenomenon here, where people are going, what on earth? There's a little aside, Craig, there's this virtual currency, some viewers might be familiar with it, called the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That is, to me, a wholly ridiculous concept. But anyway, it's one of those things that if you believe in it, it might work for you. The value of the Bitcoin has gone from some amount of 40 euros or something to 120. Just the latest figure in the last few weeks.
More speculation,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's people, that shows you the sort of flight capital out of the euro. Anyway, but let's have a look at the impact on Cyprus now, what's happening on the ground, because the fact that, like with Greece, but even worse and more sudden really, that the financial authorities are prepared to inflict this suffering on a country in order to prop up their system shows you their intention. So because there's a limit on withdrawals, the business and commerce in Cyprus is effectively ground to a halt. Businesses have been robbed of their capital because, of course, for a business to operate, you've got to be able to move around a lot more than 300 euros in a day, right? Only cash is accepted for payment. The Wall Street Journal reports that the cargo network has screeched to a halt, and Cyprus is an island country. It depends on most of its goods coming in on ships. But the shippers are refusing to accept bills of credit from the Cyprus banks because they're the ones that are in trouble, and they're only accepting cash, but 300 euros in a day can't pay for a ship worth of goods, so they're not supplying. Some goods are starting to disappear from the shop shelves, and this is the Wall Street Journal reporting this. Unable to pay suppliers, many stores have opted to close until things improve. With perishable goods such as fruit and veggies running low, some Cypriots have begun to stockpile essentials such as baby formula, tin food and olive oil. Almost everyone is trying to hoard cash. Meanwhile, unpaid bills including those for utilities, employee payrolls, many due for payment at the start of April, are stacking up. Some workers in Cyprus are bracing for a protracted period without a paycheck. So this is what's not being reported in countries like Australia. Now, what is clear, what makes it more clear than anything, Craig, that this is a crime, is when you contrast what they've done and the effect that's happening on Cyprus with what they didn't do, the financial authorities didn't do, which is Glass-Steagall. Everything they're doing is to make sure there is no return to Glass-Steagall, because if they had to put in place Glass-Steagall, then none of this would be happening, right? They've had 4 years to put Glass-Steagall in place. And instead, the central banking and regulatory authorities in the Bank of England, the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, the Fed, and even in Australia, what they've done is they've conspired on a plan to create a new financial system for the majority of the oligarchy and let the majority of people starve. So, Craig, isn't what's happening precisely what Lyndon LaRouche warned of in mid-February?
Yeah, Robbie, look, he gave a webcast on the 15th of February where he basically said the intention of the financial oligarchy is to get rid of the current system and put in a new one. And I think we should throw to Mr. LaRouche's direct webcast so people get a real flavour of that.
Because what they would do is they would not try to bail out Ben Bernanke and his operation. They would do something much nastier. They would dump Ben Bernanke, dump the existing financial system itself, ignore the system they canceled, and put in their own new system, which would mean the vast mass of debt, which is represented by the monetarist operation, would be canceled. In its place, they would have a new system of finances, which ignores entirely all the obligations associated with the old, which would mean that most of the people of the world would be starving to death quickly. This has happened before in certain ways. You had speculation in the 18th century. What was going on in the middle of the United States, or what became the United States, the great speculation. And what happens in a case like this, the amount of debt outstanding on account of this bailout system, of monetarist system, of easing, a financial easing, a monetary easing, it's got to be canceled. So there will be no such money available. There will be no such reserves. What will happen will be an international cabal will create a new system of money, which will be much smaller, much more feasibly handled than the present one. What will happen to all the people who were excluded from the use of this more limited quantity of money? They will starve to death. And that's the intention.
Well, that's clear cut. And the starving point he made, that people will starve, that is what the people of Cyprus are on the cusp of right now.
Yeah, Robbie, and you also mentioned speculation, like in the middle of America, and that speculation was a Mississippi bubble. And what people have to understand is that these bubbles, whether it be the tulip bubble, the John Laws bubble, the South Seas bubble, the Mississippi bubble, all of these bubbles are created by the oligarchy to literally rob people of their money. And that's what's going on now. So what LaRouche made very clear, for anyone who's looking at it, the intention is to realise, and the oligarchy knows, this debt is unpayable. It's $1.5 quadrillion of speculation. Right? That's really so big you can't even imagine. Their intention is to literally cancel the system. And though that means no money. So what's actually taking place in Cyprus now, where people have got no money, is the model. It's called the template, for goodness sake. In Europe, it's called the template. What's being done in Cyprus is the template for the rest of Europe, for the rest of the world. And what we've discovered also is that it didn't start in Cyprus. It started in New Zealand. That the same idea of literally having a facility in place to rob people of their deposits is a system that's been put in by the New Zealand banks, of which I believe 80% of those banks are owned by Australian banks.
Now we put out a press release on that this week, which people can read for the details. We'll talk about that in the next segment as well. But the thing is with Glass-Steagall, and people have to get a really clear sense of this, Glass-Steagall would have stopped all this.
That's the whole point, Robbie. The Glass-Steagall is designed as, like Roosevelt brought in back in 1933, actually applied it at that point, was to separate out the speculative side of the economy from the real necessary commercial banking side, which is what Cyprus is reeling from now, the lack of it. So the speculation, you basically separate out the merchant banks, the investment banks from the commercial banks, and you say to the merchant bank, investment banks, that's your business. That speculation is your business. Eat it. We're not going to pay for it. So you have a sovereign government step in, like Roosevelt did, and say we are going to have an orderly banking system. We're going to protect the banking system that we need for commerce and for the normal running of an economy.
Because what you're protecting is the daily lives of the people.
And that's what it boils
Which is
down
why
to.
you protect deposits.
That's why you have a banking system, right? No other reason for a banking system other than to promote the normal activities of a population going about their business to make a living and to exist and to improve themselves.
Now, Craig, we're going to do up to 500,000 copies very quickly of this publication. We want to get this latest news citizen. We'll get it around everywhere, and that'll be available as of next week. But what should people do to get involved in this?
Well, they should get straight onto the phone, Robbie. Give us a call. We'll send out as many papers as they want. They should read this paper, right? Get onto our website and look at the material. What's shocking for people is, and they don't really realise, I think the deer in the headlights idea is a very good one for you that you put up before. Do they really mean to kill me? Am my family going to be killed on behalf of saving the banks? And that's a hard idea to think about because it's so insane that.
But if you're in Greece now, you probably wouldn't be asking that question.
Or
because
Spain,
you know the answer.
or Cyprus, you'd know the answer.
Yep.
And the fact is that these things aren't heavily reported in the Australian media.
Yep.
I mean, even within our own Australian media, you start to see glimpses of the sorts of austerity measures. You know, the takedown of the PBS pharmaceutical benefits system, right, whereby cancer drugs are being excluded, the waiting lists in hospitals expanding out because of lack of so-called funds. Now, all of this is completely solvable through the implementation of national bank and the creation of credit which is spent into the productive side of the economy.
Which will be explained in this paper.
And that's in the paper too. So therefore, you know, we're not talking about rocket science here. It was done in from 1932 onward by Franklin Roosevelt through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. It was done by John Curtin and Ben Chifley during the war years here. These are not mechanisms that are unknown. They're in fact extremely well known. They can be done tomorrow, implemented tomorrow by any government that operates in the interest of the general welfare of the population for the general common good.
Yeah, so people need to get copies of our paper, and they also need to join our campaign. One of the things we're doing at the moment is getting constituents to go to visit members of parliament, putting this on their desk because most of these members of parliament are ignorant of what's going on. Put it on their desk and say, read this about Glass-Steagall, do you support it or not, and demand that they support it, demand they put up private members' bills, etc. All this is available by people contacting us, looking on our website. And for a real proof of the urgent necessity for Australia, Craig, people should tune in after the break. We'll go to a break now. Tune in after the break because we're going to talk about how our regulators are up to their necks in planning the same thing here. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Aussie regulators are up to their necks in planning to steal deposits. Now, Craig, this bail-in, which is what it's called, where the depositors are forced to pay for the bailout of the bank, right? It's the bail-in. Turns out has been planned well in advance. Now, you alluded before the break to New Zealand. That is where the planning is the most advanced. And in fact, in New Zealand, they started planning this after the 1997 Asia crisis. They started planning, what do we do, you know, if our banking system goes under? And so by 2007, they had a fully formed plan to say, well, the depositors will be made to pay. And they have this, they define depositors as unsecured creditors who have invested their money knowing the risk. No, they have not. Depositors do not see themselves as unsecured creditors. They see themselves as whether you're a retiree or a school child, someone who has put your hard-earned money into the bank for safekeeping. This unsecured creditor stuff is an accounting definition, and it's crap.
By bankers.
By bankers. It's convenient for them. So that's what New Zealand, by 2007, they had it up and running. They now call it open bank resolution, and all New Zealand computers are already programmed to comply with it, such that at the push of a button they can freeze and confiscate deposits and overnight take what they need, and then get the bank open again the next day. And we might even have a graphic to put on the screen so people can see the flow chart from the New Zealand Reserve Bank bragging how they do this. What the flow chart doesn't show is the third step, which is that when they do open the banks the next day, there will be a bank run.
That's why they're going to have to limit the amount of cash again, like in Cyprus.
Exactly. And you'll have, wherever this is put in place, you'll have Cyprus. So that's New Zealand. The Bank for International Settlements is sort of like the central bank of central banks. We know it's been planning this since at least 2010, and their planning is for what they call globally systemic financial institutions. In other words, if you bank with a big bank that's regarded as important for the global financial system, you will be made to pay so you can prop up their global financial system. The European Commission foreshadowed they would do this in June last year, and the Bank of England and the US Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation produced a report on it in December. And despite, as you said before, despite the carnage in Cyprus, and because it's not being reported as widely as it should, the authorities are openly insisting, now this will be the template for the world, right? So don't claim you weren't told, right? You've been told. They're open about it. Here's the thing: we're in Australia. This can't happen here, surely. It's already planned. We know firsthand, the CEC, because we're the CEC, we have lots of good sources. Australian regulators are in the thick of this. And one of the reasons why is when it comes to these regulatory bodies and central banks, they sort of sit, they're a global spider web, and they sit outside the authority of governments, right? And there's a lot of cross-penetration between them. So our regulators include personnel from the Bank for International Settlements, the Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve, and vice versa. We've got our people over there as well.
We refer to it as a Freemasonry of central banking, which is what Nugget Coombs, actually the first
That's
Reserve
right.
Bank chairman, called it,
the International Freemasonry of Central Banking. This is a case in point. Currently, the head of the Basel Committee in Switzerland is an Australian from APRA, and he's about to come back and run APRA, which is our bank regulator. The regulators here, Craig, they know the implications of what they're doing, and sources have told the CEC that there is an acknowledgement that when it happens here, there will be such a backlash from the population that it will bring down the government, even though in one sense it won't be the government's decision.
Well, here we go again. I mean, we put out a paper several years back, Robbie, in 2004, called Defeat the Syndicate, Fight for a National Bank. And the syndicate refers to the powers that are above, the financial oligarchy that represent both the left and the right so-called factions that one sees, whether it be fascism or Nazism or communism. It doesn't matter. They're all run by the same financial oligarchy with the same result of trying to control, or at least successfully controlling the population. And the intention, as Mr. LaRouche said, is to kill people. Now, Prince Philip
which fascism was that in the 30s,
Yeah.
right, where the fascists were backed by the bankers then.
Yes.
And through this syndicate apparatus, we are witnessing now, in this stage of the GFC, that same phenomenon.
Same phenomenon. And look, therefore governments that are not, the governments are compliant. They're satrapy. They're just extensions of this financial oligarchy in every single country around the world, until you actually have a political organisation that's prepared to stand up and say, no, we object with globalisation. We don't want privatisation. We want national sovereignty, which is what we represent. And we've been doing it now for over 25 years. Unless that happens, unless we get those sorts of policies in place where we ditch the supranational financial organisations and go back with these policies of national banking, then look, we are facing death. We are facing destruction. That's the intention here, and people have to really understand this is not some abstract idea anymore.
All right. We'll leave it there, this subject. When we come back, we're a slightly different subject, though it is related. Why Obama and the British don't want peace with North Korea. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Finally, Obama and the British don't want peace with North Korea. So, Craig, the other big story is North Korea's threats.
Yep.
And it's sort of gone off the charts. All of a sudden, there's maps being displayed of missile lines from North Korea to Guam, to LA, to Austin, Texas for some reason. And North Korea is flexing its muscles. We're going to have a final showdown with the United States. So this looks crazy, but there's another side, as there usually is. Oh, before I say the other side, Julia Gillard is riding a white horse into China to talk firmly with them to make sure they deal with this situation.
I was just about to say, Robbie, look, China is the closest nation to North Korea. Isn't it interesting that we've been, for over 12 months now, warning about nuclear war with China, and all of a sudden this North Korean issue blows up?
Well, here's the other side. In early February, George Bush Sr., who was the smart Bush, I'm not saying he was the good Bush, but he's definitely the smart Bush. CIA background, a long history in the US government apparatus, etc. So when he was president, one of his closest security advisors was made his ambassador to South Korea, and his name's Donald Gregg. And Donald Gregg is now an older man. He's 85 years of age. He was the head of the Korea Society in America up until 2009. He spoke out on the 5th of February to say that the new leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, is somebody that the US would be able to dialogue with. They've finally got someone they can work with. And he said he's educated in Europe. He pointed out he dismissed the hardline generals. He pointed out he's keen on economic development. And he also pointed out that his intention with nuclear weapons is to demonstrate they are a deterrent, not a threat. Because with the China thing that you just alluded to, Japan is using that as an excuse to beef up its nuclear capabilities, etc. And so North Korea wants to remind, we have this deterrent here, but not threat, right? This is what Donald Gregg is saying. And so for that reason, he said the US should not overreact to North Korea's nuclear test, which is what people might remember from a month or so ago. North Korea did this test. Well, what did the US do under Obama? What they've done is they've basically flexed their muscles and rubbed North Korea's nose in it. So what most people don't know is that there's been large-scale war games involving the US and South Korea on the Korean Peninsula. When I say large-scale, 40,000 troops and hundreds of planes and tanks, right? And all this is to send a message. Then the big one was the B-2 bombers that they sent out from wherever they are in Kansas or something, flew over the Korean Peninsula just to remind the North Koreans, hey, we're America. We can blow you to smithereens whenever we want.
As if they didn't already know that.
As if they didn't already know that. So all you've seen since all this drama has been a reaction to that. In other words, what we're seeing is what America wanted. But Craig, we involve the British in this, where we say both Obama and the British don't want peace with North Korea, because isn't what we're seeing a blatant British policy? And the British policy, like in many other cases around the world, is to keep fuses burning so that they can be turned into wars at the drop of a hat.
Well, we see that with Iran, Robbie, right now. We see it with Syria. You've seen what happened to Iraq under this responsibility to protect. The issue here is to smash the sovereignty of any country that intends to express that national sovereignty. And we've talked about this a lot. We've put two new citizens out about the threat of real nuclear war in China. Look, population reduction, getting rid of people, is what we've talked about a lot of. One way of doing it is through war, and the British won't stop at anything.
No. And if people want to be reminded, we've raised this population question a few times. If they want to be reminded how clear this is an intention, go back and read Thomas Malthus, the father of all British political economy. But we've run out of time. So thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week for more.